In this edition of Southern Newsweek, we speak to one of the rescuers of the French tourist who was recently savaged by a shark. Wanaka's infamous tree will feature in a Chinese fantasy television series, and a follow-up on the fatal shooting in Invercargill. Kia ora, I'm Holly Buchanan. A French tourist has been recovering in Dunedin Public Hospital following a shark attack in the Catlins. She was flown to Dunedin in the rescue helicopter. One of the first on the scene was Catlin's surf owner-operator Nick Smart.
This remote beach at Porpoise Bay in the Catlins was the scene of a bloody shark attack yesterday afternoon. A French woman in her 20s was left with a gash in her leg after a shark bit her while she was bodyboarding in the Catlins yesterday. Catlin's surf owner-operator Nick Smart was among the first on the scene.
I noticed a bit of a commotion down the beach and some people standing in a group and someone was running. I instantly thought there must be a problem, and so I drove down and they informed me that a young French girl had been bitten by a shark.
Smart says a team of locals rushed to her aid.
So we dragged her up the beach and just got some towels from a holiday house directly in front of us. A friend of mine owns the house, so he assisted us, and basically they did most of the work. All I really did was just ring 111 and talk to the emergency services.
As the Catlins coast is typically cold and blustery at this time of the year, he says their first priority was to get her somewhere warm.
My main concern was to get her off the wet, cold beach, because she would have got very cold. So we carried her up on the stretcher up inside my friend's house. He had the fire going, so we placed her beside the fire, kept her warm, and just assured her she was going to be okay. Told her she's not going to die. They weren't life-threatening wounds.
Smart says the woman remained very calm throughout the ordeal and says emergency services personnel were fantastic and estimated the rescue chopper got there just 30 minutes after his 111 call. The woman was flown to Dunedin Hospital, arriving late yesterday afternoon. Daryl Baser, The South Today.
The support arm of IHC, IDEA, was on nationwide strike again recently. Up to 3,000 members and those who regularly cover shifts were all on strike for 1 hour. A meeting was held at Caversham Baptist Church in Dunedin to discuss proposed changes by IDEA services.
Disability services across the sector face an uncertain future, with strike action taken this morning by support workers against proposed changes. Last night, representatives from ETU, IDEA Management and the Ministry of Health discussed the changes in a public meeting. Changes caregivers say will affect at least 58 families in Dunedin and dozens of support workers.
ETU does condemn the lack of funding that's led to this service being abandoned. As already been alluded to this evening, there has been changes in the last couple of years. Some of the workers have had their hours changed. They've lost hours here, there. They've had rosters thrust on them which they didn't actually want.
The meeting was chaired by MP for South Dunedin Claire Curran. Key on last night's agenda was the closure of the Waikola Ave Respite House.
Because Lucas can't speak so well, it's hard for him to communicate his feelings, and the way he said goodbye that night was to go around and hug the furniture and hug the walls. Can you understand as a parent to watch your 26-year-old son do that, how hard that was? It was pretty awful.
It was just absolutely appalling. There was no consultation, no sign of it. And to expect us to come, right in the holiday period, they must have planned that to travel to here, to find accommodation and everything, and yet they couldn't warn us about that. It was appalling. To actually make the decision to close Waikola without consultation with parents.
It's not even Dear Kate and Reg, we're really sorry we stuffed it up. It's memorandum too, so it's nothing personal about that at all.
Discussion became heated as some in the audience took exception to claims only 5 families had requested help from the service.
Don't you stand there and tell me that there are only 5 families who were using adult respite. There may have been, but that's because nobody else was offered it.
It makes me sad that there are many parents whose needs are greater and who don't have the energy. And now with my grey hair and 65, I'm frustrated and I'm cynical.
The ministry went on to promise reps would be called to account and to front up at a future meeting to answer the community's questions. Roselle Lebone, The South Today.
The famous Wanaka tree is to feature in a Chinese fantasy television series based on The Lord of the Rings. The television series Legend of S, formerly The Legend of Zoo, is being shot around Wanaka and Queenstown. The South Today Central reporter Mark Price reports.
A crew of 100 Chinese nationals and 50 New Zealanders spent 12 hours camped on the shores of Lake Wanaka today, next to the famous tree. Their unusual boat, some heavyweight filming equipment and a trailer full of impressive-looking props signalled they are on a mission.
We kind of call it the Law of the Ring, Chinese Law of the Ring. Basically some sword fights, and then there's a lot of fantasy scenes and CGI. Also they have online gaming as well. So the whole series was released last year, the first season, and this is coming to be the second season. Yeah.
Legend of S might be a Chinese language fantasy with a medieval look, but it is on point when it comes to catering for a television audience of online gamers wanting participation.
When you're doing all the scenes, you have different swords, you have all the weapons, and eventually on the online game you can sell the weapons and all the fantasy world. So that's kind of linked up together, like the Hollywood system. When Transformers have all the toys, and then when the movie comes out, then people start buying the toys, and that's how it gets related.
Is this kind of the future for television series, maybe?
Oh yes, definitely, especially for fantasy or something that is not realistic. They can have this room for them to build with more cash coming in. Yeah.
The weapons are all fakes, but their online digital versions will be sold to gamers.
Most of the weapons and all the wardrobe was bought over from China. We have about 40-50 pieces of armories and about 600 pieces of costumes. So everything is bought over from China, and then of course we have the boat is made in New Zealand, and some of the small props. Yeah.
Much of the series is being shot in China. The location crew in the Wanaka and Queenstown area for about 3 weeks, picking up the scenery shots. Anyone looking for the Legend of S online might find it useful to have a working knowledge of Mandarin. Mark Price for The South Today.
A religious group known as Elohim and described by some as a cult is operating in Dunedin. The group holds regular meetings at the University of Otago and is said to be recruiting students. Roselle Lebone has more.
The Roslyn Presbyterian Church in Highgate is the Dunedin HQ of the World Mission Society of God, which believes founder An Sung Hong is the incarnation of Christ. The South Today was told that using the name Elohim or the Elohim Training Institute, the group is approaching Dunedin people on the University of Otago campus and outside shopping malls.
And they tipped over and actually started trying to recruit her, quite seriously.
Esme Hall is a student and writer for the magazine Critic, and last week wrote a piece on Elohim.
Female students walking alone who are getting targeted, that's the majority of the friends that I've had, that's the experience they've had.
In Critic, Hall reports on the experience one of her friends had being baptised into the group.
And she just didn't really know how to say no and ended up getting taken to their church and pretty much baptised in there in the name of their God.
Student Izzy Condon also reports the group tried to pressure her into signing up.
You need to give us an answer right now. Are you going to follow us or are you not? And it just it's very whoa, just very intense.
When they are wandering campus and going up to particularly young women and encouraging them to come with them, like drive with them up to this church in Roslyn. You know, that's not really a savoury kind of experience.
It just felt very invasive, almost like intimidating in the way where someone says, like, kind of like you're wrong, or like what you think is not right.
Lecturer and recognised cult expert Peter Daly, who now lives in South Korea, says universities need to do more to educate students on the presence of cults on campus.
It can take time for these groups to become known and gain a reputation. And that's the benefit of these transitory front groups. You know, if one particular front group is banned from university, you know, they'll just register under a different name or stop using that name.
So it's a Thursday, it's 7 o'clock, and I'm just about to go and see if Elohim, aka World Mission Society of God, will speak to me. They're holding a meeting at the moment, which I believe is for new initiates. Are you willing to speak with me about your organisation? I've been speaking to a young woman who had some serious questions for you. Otago University Student Association Communications Manager Katrina McLennan told the South Today in a statement this week, "I don't believe OUSA has received a formal complaint, but please rest assured that this is being addressed internally." Roselle LeBone, the South Today.
The family of Invercargill shooting victim Verity McLean Nibaba and her husband Ben, who is accused of murdering her, has issued a statement. Spokeswoman Jane Allen said the family of Ben and Verity were very shocked and trying to cope as best they could. Here's Ruby Spink in Invercargill.
Otapuni Avenue in Invercargill is still cordoned off today. Police forensic teams are working at the scene of the double shooting, an industrial building where Verity McLean was shot and killed. Police allege she was murdered by her husband, Ben McLean. They allege also that McLean shot and attempted to murder Gary Duggan at the same address. Duggan is in Southland Hospital in a stable condition. McLean is also in Southland Hospital. At a special district court hearing at the hospital I attended yesterday, Judge Mark Callaghan remanded McLean in custody to appear via video link at a hearing on May 18th. Judge Callaghan imposed several suppression orders at the hearing, including one covering McLean's domestic situation. However, the court has clarified today the media is able to report the McLeans were living apart and that Mrs. McLean and Duggan were living together at the Otapuni address. The family of Ben and Verity McLean made a statement today. In it, Jane Allen says the family acknowledges the tragic circumstances following the events on Tuesday night. They're shocked and wanted to acknowledge the Invercargill community for their outpouring of support and compassion, in particular the police, St John's Ambulance, hospital staff and victim support. And they ask for privacy at this time. Invercargill Mayor Tim Shadbolt today expressed his condolences to the families concerned.
No, well, I've been here as the Mayor for 23 years and we certainly haven't had anything remotely similar to a tragedy on this scale. And everyone's heart, of course, goes out for the children, especially in a situation like this. So it's just a tragic situation.
And senior Southland Police also expressed their condolences.
This is obviously a huge tragedy for everyone involved. We are dealing with 3 different families who have been affected and are trying to provide them with all the necessary support that we can. We are also supporting police staff in Invercargill who are, as you understand, naturally very shocked and dismayed at what has taken place.
Senior police officers from outside Southland have been brought in to oversee the murder inquiry. I'm Ruby Spink in Invercargill for the South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, there's too much weed in Queenstown, lakeweed that is. It's intrusive, expensive and damaging the environment. And the World Bike Polo stage receives a Timaru team. Welcome back. Lake Wakatipu is under threat of being infiltrated with a fast-growing aquatic weed. The weed, Ligura siphon, has been found growing in some sections of the Kawara River and is threatening recreational activities like water skiing and the popular jet boating. Mina Amso has the latest.
Lake Wakatipu may look pristine, but it is under threat of being infiltrated with this aquatic weed. It is called Ligura siphon, or South African oxygen weed. I went out with Queenstown Lake's District Harbour Master Marty Black to have a look. The weed can be seen growing in thick clumps along different sections of the Kawara River. Black says the weed can triple in size in just 1 year. Spreading in all directions, this piece is about half a metre long already. You can see it budding at the surface. Aquatic weed management consultant Paul Decker says the weed poses a serious threat to Lake Wakatipu.
Basically taking over, and then it starts to die off, and you get pollution and all sorts of things. It can even cause deaths of bird life, because what happens is salmonella, for instance. A bird dies, it's infected with salmonella, the fly maggots feast on it, and it's caught in the weed. Other birds come along and eat those fly maggots, and they then get salmonella and they die.
He says it's more likely to spread along the shorelines and infiltrating the lake if not controlled.
It can only grow at certain depths and depends on the clarity of the water and so on. So the more you can manage it, the more you can live with it.
Land Information New Zealand Biosecurity Manager Dave Moll says the weed grows up to 5 metres, strangling native plants and ecology, and poses safety problems and hazards for lake users.
Do you think these are?
Decker says the weed can have serious economical impacts.
Swimming and boating activities are all reduced. Fishing activities are impeded.
So this special kind of weed actually grows by cutting. So a boat that is driving or actually churning on the weed cuts it out, makes it easier for the weed to grow and actually spread it further. 2 sections of the Kawara River have been cordoned off for this very reason. Decker says it has taken the weed years to get here, and it will take years to get it under control. Land Information New Zealand has set up a weed management group to deal with the issue. They now hope boaties and river users do their part to help prevent the spread of this problematic aquatic weed. Mina Amso, The South Today.
The World Bike Polo stage will be joined by 5 South Island team members following a Timaru team's recent success in Melbourne. They secured themselves a place in the Sports Championship in Kentucky later this year.
The team, Timaru Bike Polo, is made up of Ash Manson, Carl Whittleston, Richard Brown, Sam Gullender and Mike Broadhead. They competed at the Australasian Hardcourt Bike Polo Championships from April 7 to 9th, with the aim of qualifying for World Champs, achieving their goal with 4th place. Manson says a lot of training went into this one.
We found out there was a format change from teams of 3 to a squad of 5 and 2 15-minute halves, which was a lot more polo and a lot more training and effort required.
The group was now looking at ways to raise the $10,000 each member needs to make the trip.
We've got quiz nights and dinner nights and things. There'll be a Give a Little page set up very shortly, I believe. And the dream is that we can fly into the States and then take an RV interstate and arrive in Lexington a couple of days before the tournament. We can settle in and calm down and do the business, and it'll be fun.
The World Hardcourt Bike Polo Championship is held in Lexington, Kentucky from October 3rd to October 7th. The game is said to have been started in Seattle in the 2000s by messengers who had downtime between deliveries. It is now played throughout over 30 countries. Siobhan Watson, The South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, the iconic Wanaka tree is generally the centre of attention, but for a few minutes recently, Pango stole its limelight. And the pitter-patter of many feet in Gore as a half marathon rolled through town. Welcome back. The Wanaka tree is generally the centre of attention among tourists visiting Lake Wanaka in the evening. But earlier this week, Czech Republic pianist Wojciech Pango Zamanek, mostly known as Pango, stole the tree's limelight for a few minutes. The South Today's Wanaka reporter Tim Miller was there to capture the moment.
"29-year-old Zumnik has been playing the piano since he was 5. Although he says he was never a good piano student, always improvising rather than following the lesson plan. Zumnik has spent the last 3 years in New Zealand travelling and busking. His audience this week? The Wanaka tree and a busload of tourists who just happened by. I'm Tim Miller for the South Today.
And finally, the pitter-patter of many feet running filled the streets of Gore last weekend at the town's half marathon. Organisers say the below-average weather conditions reduced the number of people entering.
Just prior to the start of the annual Gore Half Marathon, competitors were battling chilly, wet and windy conditions. The 12-kilometre event is coordinated by the Gore Harriers Club, and President Nigel Marsh says the weather wasn't on their side. The club had hoped for 300 entries, but Marsh believes they were well short of that target. Nevertheless, the brave souls who took part seemed to enjoy the run, and in some cases walk. First man across the line was Shannon Gudsell of Edendale, who says he was stoked as it was his first win in a half marathon. And the first woman across the line was Tanya Copeland of Tuatapere. The win was the third time she'd entered the event and says she gave it her all. The Gore Harriers Club moved the event forward this year after previous year's cooler conditions and inclement weather. Daryl Baser, The South Today.
And that's all for this edition of Southern Newsweek. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, or you can keep up with Southern News via our website, channel39.co.nz. I'm Holly Buchanan. Thanks for watching.